2016 is going to be the hottest year on record. So was 2015 and 2014 before it. Climate change may be the biggest problem that humanity ever faced. So why is it that nobody, nearly nobody, knows the climate footprint of anything? In 1994, I started Greenpeace in Israel. I was a windsurfer while I was a student, and I was disgusted by the pollution of the sea. So our first target was a company called Haifa Chemicals. Haifa Chemicals had a ship that discharged, by license, toxic waste into the Mediterranean every day. One day, we drove our boats, and we stopped it with our bodies. We just stayed in the water for 4 hours of fierce negotiation and stopped it. Smashing success. The ship went back without dumping. But if you think about climate change, don't think that it's a success so fast. Because climate change is a more nuanced problem than stopping a dump ship. We cannot stop every car, we cannot stop every power plant because we drive those cars and we use the electricity. So we need to think with numbers. Numbers matter. In every decision in our life, we use numbers. On budget, on food, on diet, on sports. The most important problem, climate change, we use adjectives. Green, renewable, sustainable, low carbon. What does these adjectives mean? 10 years after I left Greenpeace, I ran into the same problem. I was the CEO of a company called Heliofocus. We had an installation in Inner Mongolia, China. And what we were building is the world's largest solar concentrator. Those concentrators were designed to replace some of the coal in conventional power plants with solar energy, a green solution. Each concentrator has a concrete base, has glass to reflect the sun, and has a massive steel structure that holds it as it tracks the sun with accuracy of about 1 degree. Huge engineering achievement. But how do you produce steel, especially in China? So all our steel, our concrete, our glass was bought in a province called Hebei. This is how it looks. Massive amounts of coal is burned to produce the steel, to galvanize the steel, to process the steel that we were buying. This is the back end of clean tech. If you think about clean tech as a restaurant, this is the kitchen that you don't want to see. Hebei is where the first emperor of China was born. Think about him waking up today, looking at his province, seeing that some of the cities became ghost towns because it's so polluted. In some cases, groundwater are so bad that companies need to truck water for the villages to drink. So I was developing clean tech without knowing that my back end is so polluting. So I tried to understand whether I'm better than the competition. As a physicist, I tried to do the calculation. It took me a long time, too long time to understand that I'm about 10 times better than the competition. I'm not green, I'm not sustainable. Forget about all these adjectives. There is a scale, there is a continuum, I'm just better. This revelation that we can think quantitatively about our impact sort of changed my life. I left the company, and I spent the next 5 years working with corporations, helping them understand, think quantitatively about their carbon impact, carbon footprint. But this information should be in the public domain. It shouldn't be only in the corporate world. So a few months ago, I started a new organization. It's called Greenometry. Just like you have geometry, you will have Greenometry, to allow everyone to understand the carbon footprint of everything. Why is it such a complex problem? Why can't we just know our carbon footprint, just like we know other things? Think about this room right now. Right now, we might be getting electricity from a hydro power plant in Quebec or a coal-fired power plant in Connecticut. We just don't know. If you drove here with an electric car, lucky you, if it was charged with coal, you're as polluting as your next neighbor that drove a conventional car. You just don't know. And the reason you don't know, one of the reasons, is that it's a very complex mathematical problem. Once you place an electron on the grid, it doesn't have an ID card. You don't know where it comes from. So you don't know if it came from a clean source or not. This is a model that we've developed to analyze the electricity grid in the US. So the Greenometry team developed a model to allow everybody to know where electricity comes from because 30% of our carbon footprint is electricity, to improve our understanding of our own carbon footprint. But this is just the beginning of the problem. The actual problem is that even if we're given the data, we cannot interpret it because we're so carbon ignorant. Carbon is too abstract for us. It's not part of our daily lives. To give an example, if I would ask anyone in the room, how many calories are in a bagel with cream cheese? People will give an estimate within the right order of magnitudes, hundreds. Nobody will say 10 million. But what about carbon? Think about the simplest example for carbon. Our biggest decision in everyday life is to get into our car and drive. So a gallon of gasoline. A gallon of gasoline is such a physical experience that Dan Ariely wrote once that the average American spends about 2 hours a year fueling their cars with nothing better to do, just look at how much it costs. And we're so familiar with the cost that it's given to us with fractions of cents. So how good do we know the carbon footprint? Amir Greenstein from Northeastern and our group at Greenometry did an experiment. We've asked 300 people to estimate the carbon footprint of a gallon of gas. The actual answer is about 9 kilograms of CO2. Some people said that it's grams. Some people said that it's tons. The estimation error was 2 to 3 orders of magnitude, which means imagine stepping into a Starbucks, wanting to order a cup of coffee, and not knowing whether it should cost $300 or 0.3 cents. This is how bad we are with carbon. So we need to solve the interpretation problem and the data problem. And we need very simple interpretation in the front end because we need simple numbers, just like 10,000 steps, really simple. But the back end needs to be complex. It needs to take into account where electricity comes from, where water comes from, and so on. Weight Watchers had a very interesting solution to a different problem. A much easier problem because people care about their weight, and unfortunately they don't care that much about the climate. But a Weight Watcher point is a combination of fat, fiber, and calories. And they combine all these 3 factors, which can be rather complex, into one number. And people on the diet just manage their meals according to these points. So we've developed something similar for the climate. It's called energy points. An energy point is equivalent to a gallon of gas. Very simple. Think about gallons of gas. 1 energy point is a gallon of gas. The back end is where all the complexity lies, where you have big data, data science, where you take into account roads and electricity and infrastructure and water and so on. So that is the idea. But why is it so important? Why is it so critical? Why should you care? Today it is critical. It is known that our economic system impacts the climate. And it's unfortunately also known that the federal government is unlikely to fund the solution. So the market needs to step in and fund it and solve it. But markets only work with numbers that are simple, verifiable, and accurate. So that's what we create. Now, you may think about it as something which is just for big power plants and big institutions, but it's not. Everyday decision, what you eat, what you buy, we can think about it with numbers, simple numbers. Think about my running shoe. I'm really proud of the Nike Flyknit, and I bought it because Nike advertised that it saves about 20% of the waste relative to the parallel shoe Pegasus because they only use 1 thread. But this doesn't tell us anything about the climate, right? If you use energy points and you quantify the energy and the water and other things that go into making the shoe, you see that Flyknit is indeed better, but the decision to buy a shoe, a running shoe, is about 3 energy points. It's like driving 100 miles in my environmental car. Really simple. So I start to build a quantitative language. I start thinking about my impact with numbers. If I'm a policymaker, if I'm an investor, if I'm a consumer, if I'm a company manager, I start to have a quantitative language. What's even more interesting is that if we have a cleaner infrastructure, like in Portland, Oregon, Nike's headquarters, we can benefit from this cleaner infrastructure because it's about 30% less climate impact when you use the hydroelectric in Oregon and the cleaner water. So from the economic perspective, domestic manufacturing from the climate perspective has an advantage because you don't use all these coal. So bottom line, We cannot solve the most important 21st century problem, climate change, with 20th century approach. We need big data, we need data science, and we need very simple numbers. Greenometry is founded exactly to solve that, to have big data in the back end and simple numbers in the front end. And we depend on data. We're dependent on data. But with all the respect to data, not everything that counts can be counted. Sometimes you just need to jump in front of a dump ship and stop it. Thank you very much.